All right. Hi, everyone. If you can just put a little chat in there and let me know that you can hear and see me. And then we will get started here in just a second. All right. Thank you to our early birds for letting us know that we're all good here to get started. Thank you all for joining us. The community team at the Mom Project welcomes you for another installment of our Unity Hour. This series is designed to keep us moving together well apart. Yes, we're still apart mostly. My name is Colleen Curtis, Chief Community Officer at the Mom Project, and Lisa, my colleague, is womaning the YouTube chat to welcome all of you that attend live today. We've fielded over 600 questions from 2,500 RSVPs to this session, clearly a hot topic, negotiation and compensation. So we likely won't have time for audience questions for the sessions, but feel free to add questions to the chat. We always use this as a way to develop future content and be able to address some of the burning questions. So please listen, learn from the session. We put together this incredible panel. We're thrilled to have them here to talk really about value. So negotiation and compensation, but really it boils down to value and how we can advocate for that. So as a reminder, the entire session will be recorded and can be accessed via the YouTube channel. You'll also receive an email with the link and follow-up items from the host if you've RSVP'd to the session. So we've got you covered, and we know things come up. If you have to dash to take care of a kid or a dog or work or whatever, we're going to record and you can watch it after this. Like I said, we're thrilled to see so many of you here today. Unity has become increasingly important as we all navigate layers upon layers of challenges. The only constant is change, and we're super grateful for your participation and acknowledging that showing up here is an ambitious effort all in itself right now, specifically as school has started and many of you are managing e-learning. The Mom Project was founded to build a better workplace for the future, for moms, for everyone, and a big part of this mission is the powerful community that's formed around this purpose. Each of you play a super important role in that. So thank you today for showing up. We might be here individually to invest in ourselves, specifically around negotiation and compensation, and continue on this path of working motherhood. We're really in this together, and so our collective success really depends on what we can do for each other. And so we're welcoming 3 really incredible women today to talk about negotiation and compensation. I know we have all been in situations where we didn't know what to ask for, how to ask for it, when to ask for it, how to go in confidently. There's so much to unpack around negotiation and compensation. So we're really viewing this as a 101 intro session. We've collected some incredible speakers today that are going to give us their best. And so we are going to introduce a bit of them today. So first, we have Jordan Sale, founder of 81 Cents. This is a platform which helps women and underrepresented minorities make sure they're being paid market rates by getting them personalized market data, compensation feedback, and career advice from hiring managers and recruiters in their field. Niani Tolbert is a marketer turned recruiter and the founder of Hire Black Initiative. Started as a LinkedIn post to help 19 Black women get resume feedback on Juneteenth and has grown into an initiative whose goal is to help 10,000 Black women get trained, hired, or promoted. And Ashley Cash, some of you will remember her from our resume redo session in April, is a career corporate girl, working mom, and interview and salary negotiation coach to women who are overworked and underpaid. You might remember Ashley from our resume redo back in April. So she is back to talk negotiation and compensation. One of her favorite things to talk about is the money. And so we are super thrilled. We're going to hear from them right now. So Niani, I would love to start with you. Can you give us a brief on how Hire Black was born and why you wanted to be part of this session specifically?
Yes, 100%. Thank you so much for having me, Colleen. I started at the Hire Black Initiative. It was just a LinkedIn post asking for recruiters in my network to help with 19 Black women get resume review sessions on Juneteenth. Within 48 hours, over 300 recruiters reached out and over 500 Black women signed up to get their resumes reviewed. So I stopped. I said, what is going on? We have to try to get all of these people connected. I'm furloughed, so I have time. I got all the time in the world. And I realized how important, since I'm a tech recruiter by day, how important that information is to be able to know how to negotiate, having this idea or knowing the conversations that happen in the back end between the decision makers. I want to make sure that that is as transparent as possible to everyone. So I'm here today because I think that there's a lot of information that recruiters see from the back from the back end, and I want to bring that to light as you guys continue to advance in your career.
That's awesome. And how can people get involved with Hire Black now? We've got a lot of listeners out there now. What would you say like they could do to get involved?
Yes, so we have a Slack group, and we are also throwing a summit. So we were originally trying to help 19 Black women. That community has grown to over 3,500 people in our Slack group. We want to connect allies so that allies can learn how to be a better ally for a more equitable and diverse and inclusive environment in their workforce with Black women and Black talent. So this is a community for everyone. Everyone is here to learn. Everyone can advance professionally. Go to hireblacknow.com in order to join us, and find us at the Hire Black Summit at hireblacksummit.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Niani. We are at the Mom Project a proud sponsor of that summit. And so we will be showing up on October 17th as well. So you will also hear about this from the Mom Project. So, okay, over to Jordan, founder of 81 Cents. Would love to just know why you started 81 Cents. And if you could just give a brief on how it works, I think that would be super helpful. And why you were excited to join this session.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started 81 Cents a little over 2 years ago. And ultimately what happened was I was sick of talking to really smart, talented friends who are incredibly capable and ambitious and accomplished, and hearing how much they struggled with negotiation. I was talking to like one friend in particular who I'm just kind of like always in awe of, and they were telling me like how insecure they felt, how awkward they felt asking, for like a pretty modest, I think it was like a 5 or 10% increase in pay. And it was just astounding to me. Like, as their friend, I was like, I don't understand. Like, you are incredible, talented, you have everything you need to be successful. Like, why is this so hard? And obviously that's an experience that I felt as well, where I've just felt so uncomfortable talking about money, asking for more. I've been made to feel really guilty for asking for more. Still super taboo, and it's quite frankly fucked up. I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to curse.
We won't. It's not a radio version, so we won't edit that out.
I have a really bad habit of doing that when I talk about pay inequity. Anyways, though, it was just sort of this moment of like, okay, why is this okay? Why is this happening? And I noticed that, it was in particular my female friends and my friends of color who were the ones that were struggling the most with that. We obviously see this connect to a lot of macro problems where we see super large wage gaps. 81 cents is representative of what women on average earn compared to men, but obviously there's a lot more there. Women of color earn substantially less. There are different groups of men that earn less than 81 cents. I mean, it's just a massive problem, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just negotiation, but negotiation is one clear area where we see that people continually hold themselves back, but then also face bias on the other side of the table. Like women, for example, tend to negotiate 4 times less frequently than men, for example. And we see lots of different ways that this plays out. And it matters because literally negotiating your first job can literally lead to $1 million difference in lifetime earnings, because it'll impact what your bonus looks like that year. It'll impact what your promotion looks like. It'll impact how much you're able to invest and add to your 401k and accrue over time via compound interest. So it just is such a massive, important problem. And I looked around and I just didn't see a lot happening. Like, everyone knows it's a problem. I never have to explain why the work we're doing is important, but there were just not very many solutions out there. So 81 Cents was meant to be a solution. And basically our model is that we want to help people feel more confident and have data going into a negotiation, because data is ultimately what you can use to persuade the recruiter or the hiring manager that you deserve more. And it also makes you feel a lot more confident. So the way our model works is not so different than Hire Black. Like, we have a community of people who care about the problem. We have hiring managers, we have recruiters, we have about 2,500 on our platform so far, and they basically volunteer to advise individuals as they go through tough negotiations. So someone comes to us, submits the details of their pay, and then our community helps them and says, here's what we would do if we were in your shoes. We've seen offers similar to this, and they're actually substantially higher. Here's the data you need. So it's been an awesome journey so far. We've helped about 510 people, and on average, people see a 17% increase in pay. So yeah. to me, it was like obvious for why to be here today. This is like what I spend all my time thinking about. And then to partner with people like Ashley and Niani on this is just super meaningful. So
we are so grateful you are here. And also, I am one of those compensation reviewers with 81 cents. And if you are interested in doing that as a member of the community, it's a really great way to contribute to someone's success. So thank you for founding 81 cents. It's really an incredible platform and product. And we are so glad to have you here. And last but not least, Ashley Cash rejoining us, the 100K resume career coach. And so most of our group is acquainted with you. We've also going to re-up on the resume redo because people are like, what, I missed it? Like I can see it in the chat. But like, I missed Ashley, so we'll send that out as well in the follow-up. But I would love to just know from you, Ashley, like over the last 6 months, since the last time we saw you, how has it been out there for your clients and as they've navigated compensation? Like, I would love just a temperature read. We're so excited that you're back here with us and have such tactical experience helping women negotiate this.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad to be back. Hey, old friend. But it's interesting because I have had lots and lots of clients come to me and say, I am fielding an offer, or in some instances, multiple offers, but I'm worried about negotiating, right? It's a tough climate. Should I not just be so grateful to have a job offer and just accept it? And the fact of the matter is, yes, you should be grateful to have an offer, but it's always a good time to negotiate. And the way I frame it back to clients is to always say, negotiations are a conversation. So it's always a good time to have a conversation. And to answer your question specifically, Colleen, we're still negotiating. Now, one of the things, and we'll talk more about this as we go on, is we're negotiating with context, right? The way we approach a negotiation with joining a company that's just laid off half of its workforce may be a little bit different than the way we approach a negotiation with a company that's, Zoom is probably a great example, right? If we're joining Zoom, who's booming right now, we might approach those negotiations slightly differently. So of course, we're always thinking about context, but the short answer is, pandemic or not, if you're getting an offer, it is always an appropriate time to have the conversation of negotiations. And my clients are doing that, and we're having our counter offers accepted. So that hopefully is an encouragement to anyone facing that right now.
That is so great to hear. It segues very well into our first question. So I think generally we're seeing like there's a lot to unpack there in that interview kind of offer stage negotiation, but that impetus for negotiation feels straightforward, right? Like you get the offer, the counter offer might feel like, oh my gosh, okay, I got to get prepared for this, but it's a little bit more expected. If you're currently employed and looking to negotiate or have a conversation with your manager or your department head, how do you do that? Like, how do we know how do we bring up the negotiation outside of sort of a comp review or some more organized format? Like, how do we recognize the signs and be able to negotiate while we're currently in-house? I guess we'll start with you, Ashley, and then I'd love to hear from Jordan and Niani.
Absolutely. So I think, again, using that word context and climate is really important. I always sort of advise people, if and where you can, approach that topic, fresh off of a win, right? It's timing is everything. So sometimes it's maybe not great to broach that topic, the day that you guys lost a big contract or, something crazy is going on in the office. But I think if you're approaching it from the vantage point of, hey, boss person, I want to have a conversation about not just my compensation, but just my career in general, right? And sort of frame it around the context of, I've taken on more responsibility. We've seen tremendous growth. I've made these contributions. And I want to have a talk about what that means for us from a company standpoint, from my career overall, and then also compensation, right? And so you kind of just give them a little bit of a heads up that I don't just want to talk about money, but I want to talk about it in the macro, and then allow them to kind of prepare for the conversation.
That's fantastic. Niani, anything to add from kind of the recruiter angle? I know you've worked with a lot of candidates as well. Sort of how else can we be most effective sort of recognizing when it's time and then as we go into it?
Yes, I think that having all of the information, having everything documented as much as possible is super important. So, in addition to the when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, I would always say speak up, because that is the start, that is the moment where you need to start documenting exactly what you do. So, when I'm in recruiting, oftentimes when it comes to even how many job recs that I'm working on, say, I say, these are all the job recs. This is what I do from day to day. No matter how small the task is, write down every single thing that you feel like you have to do this week. Take it to your manager and say, these are all of the things that I have to do this week. This is 60 things, this is 80 things, 20 things, whatever it looks like. Now, can you help me know what the priority is? So even if you know, make sure that that's in front of the manager so that they know exactly what you're doing, because people continue to give you things to do but forget all of the things that you're working on. So take that list, do that every single week if you can. Hopefully you have that one-on-one time with your manager. And what I would say is have a green. Green means yes, let's go. Yellow is do that after, and then red is stop, so that you're making sure that what you're doing aligns with the manager. So when you have a win, you're aligned with your manager's what considers is a win, and your manager also knows exactly what you're doing. Your manager also knows your workload and can tell, hey, actually, this is not going to be able to happen this week. I need either help or I need more pay. So I think that having more of those conversations so that everyone knows what's going on, everyone knows the transparency, maybe at the end of the week saying, hey, I got all of this stuff done. Make sure that that is not only with your manager, but try to make sure that that's actually out with a peer, with another person as well, so that someone knows everyone knows what you're working on. If you have Slack, a lot of people have Slack. What I would say is try to see if someone can shout you out on Slack, or try to say, hey, we've just launched this. Make what you're doing very approachable, accessible, have everyone know what you're working on, so that, when it comes to compensation and when it comes to review time, people can vouch for you. People can review for you. So that's my biggest tidbit, having those documentations and continuing to make sure that that's in front of whoever you're working with.
That's great. And I'm going to pull out that point. If you're not talking to your manager every week, they control who gives you the compensation upgrade. And it can be hard, right? Some organizations and cultures are really good at weekly meetings, compensation reviews, and some aren't. And so as you're sort of navigating some of this, I would say, we can't count on other people to document it and create that transparency. So that's awesome. And then Jordan, I'd love for you to just add in around sort of like how important is sort of market data and to arm yourself during a kind of in-house negotiation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love all of the points mentioned so far. They're just all so spot on. I will say, to Niani's point, I once talked with a woman who ended up having to work remotely for 4 months or so. And it was kind of like awkward. This is not in like a COVID era, so it was a little bit more of a touchy subject for the company. And so the woman ended up sending like a weekly status report of like, here's what I did this week, here's what's up next week. And when she got back from working remotely, she was like instantly given a 25% raise. And it was because she had just sort of by happenstance started communicating more of what she was doing. Like her work hadn't changed at all. If anything, it had gotten more uncomfortable because she wasn't in the office, but just by virtue of communicating. Like, I think we often assume other people pay more attention to us than they do. In reality, you're the only one that knows what you're working on. So I really loved that example. The other thing I would add on the topic is don't wait till the comp review to bring it up. The decision has already been made at that point. There was already a meeting with your manager and other managers and more senior individuals to talk about what raises people are getting at least like 2 weeks, if not a month, before you ever hear. So if you bring it up in that conversation, like it's already been decided. And if you ask your manager to go back and see if they can get you, more, that just puts them in an uncomfortable position and makes them look to their higher ups like they didn't have alignment on their team before all of this. So like start it a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks ahead of time, and then they'll go in like advocating for the number that you want. But that doesn't answer your actual question, which is about the importance of data in these conversations, which I think it's super, super important. I mean, obviously, you know, people have probably heard of examples of you get a counter offer or you get a new offer and then you bring it back to your company and you're like, hey, I got this offer, it's higher. And then they match it to try to get you to stay. That obviously is like the power of showing market data and showing that, you know, hey, don't take me for granted. Like there are other places out there that want me and are willing to compensate me at a higher rate. So that's obviously effective, with the big disclaimer that like you can't just do that all the time. Like you have relationships you're trying to respect and maintain, but like I do think that shows how powerful market data can be. I personally love when people have conversations with peers and others in their network and are just kind of like always trying to get a sense of what their market data looks like, because I think it'll just give you an innate sense of your worth so that it's not like such a big deal to have this conversation. So you don't feel like you're begging for $2,000 more. So you like inherently know, yeah, I'm being paid like $15,000 less than I should. Like this conversation should be a no-brainer. And if they're not going to give me what I need, I'm going to go elsewhere. And I think like that's one reason why having data is so powerful. And then the second is obviously for the persuasive aspect, which is, you know, it certainly is more obvious sometimes in a new offer situation how having data helps, but like it's never going to hurt you when you're talking within your company about, you know, what you're seeing in the market right now, what your peers are earning in the market right now. But I would say you definitely want to balance that with like, and here's all of the amazing work I'm doing, and here's how I'm impacting the bottom line. And I'd say a lot of times thinking about like the metrics that matter most to your manager can be most effective. Like if they care a ton about renewal rates or subscription rates or retention or like, I don't know, whatever the metrics are, like you want to speak in their language. And so if market salary data is their language, great, go with that. But if there's another metric that matters more to them, then like focus on how you've impacted that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jordan. Quick follow-up question. Besides Glassdoor or 81 Cents, what are some of the other good resources to kind of understand market compensation rates?
Yeah, it's a lifelong quest for great, accurate data. I will say Hire Black has a database that they launched about a month ago. So that's an awesome option. Obviously still growing, but I expect that to be really big soon. If you work in or around tech, the H1B database is a resource a lot of people don't know about. Basically, if you're sponsored, an international individual who's sponsored to work in the US, the company that's sponsoring you has to report what you're earning. And so there's like a publicly accessible database with that information. The caveat there is that it's only base salary. So you're not going to see what bonuses look like. You're not going to see what equity looks like. And hopefully we'll have a chance later in the discussion to talk about the importance of everything outside of base salary, because it's so, so important. But that is a really good resource. Obviously, I think, you know, your network is the best resource. It can be really awkward to have those conversations, but it's so important. And I think there are some things you can do to make it a little less awkward by acknowledging the awkwardness or sharing your own pay first and asking for feedback, or asking, you know, what do others in similar roles earn? I think those are all ways that it can be a little bit less awkward. And then the last thing I'd say is recruiters. Recruiters are obviously like the holders of current market data. So if you know recruiters, they can be a great resource. If you build relationships with recruiters, they can be a great resource. And then also a lot of third-party recruiting firms publish salary data really regularly. So like if you work in tech, for example, Vettery is a great resource and they put out quarterly salary reports. Or Robert Half is a massive recruiter. You can go on their website and sign up for comp reports. So I think a lot of people don't realize that those are out there, and you have to kind of cobble together the data that works for you. But there's a lot out there.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful. I had a feeling there wasn't a $1 million question like answer on that one of like, great, you just go to this secret thing and then you're going to have all the market data for every role at every level, right? Yeah, it's just like, yeah. And so I would also say like, as we're all very passionate about closing the gender pay gap, the reason it's been allowed to exist is because we are taught not to talk about finances, right? And so the more we talk about finances and what we make and our compensation packages, the more we're going to be able to kind of write permission slips for other people to do the same. So thank you guys. That was a really incredible answer. I think a lot of what we experience around negotiation is this emotional response to having to go into that conversation. And so would love just what, and we start with you, Ashley, your tips on sort of approaching it and feeling confident. And sort of what we're hearing a lot in the questions is like, I get shaky during the comp review time. My voice starts to shake. I'm sweating. Like I'm literally like having a visceral response to being able to have to talk about my value. And so I would love just to toss it around the panel and how do we get over that? How do we do that in a way that becomes more effective?
Absolutely. So I talk about this a lot with women and really moms, right? So I always say sometimes when we have to do hard things, we have to almost go outside of ourselves. And what I mean by that is, you know, I get nervous about certain things too, but when I'm mama bear, I'm really more like a pit bull, right? There's nothing that gets in my way. I have no nerves. I have no fear when I'm protecting my little cub. And so one of the tips I would give to anyone who feels, you know, almost that paralyzing fear is think about not why you're doing it, but who you're doing it for, right? So if you start thinking about, I'm having this conversation so my baby can, you know, go to college, or so that I can buy my children a home, or so that my children can go to college debt-free, right? When you sort of step outside yourself a little bit and think about, I can do this because I want Corey to be able to take ballet, right? And then it again, mama bear mode just comes over me and I'm like, I can do it. So that would be the first thing for anyone who feels sort of gripped with fear. The second thing that's maybe more practical for those of us who are maybe less emotional and more, you know, again, practical or pragmatic is practice, right? Literally take the time to go through your market data. I love how Jordan talked about really thinking about your accomplishments sort of in context of the company's bottom line or the metrics that matter most, right? Write those things out. And if you need to write a little script out and sort of start to think through what you want to say, start to think through, okay, if they give me this rebuttal that the money is not in the budget, here's what I'm going to say, right? And y'all, before I was an actual coach, when I was just more of a job seeker, I would stand in the mirror and practice introducing myself. I would practice a counter offer. Because I'd be like, okay, let me look at my eyes. Let me look at my mouth. You know, let me start to just think through those things. Or if you have a friend, a family member, a partner, practice with them and say, okay, you be boss person. I'm going to be me. Let's go, right? And then that's how you start to kind of get your nerve up. So those are some really kind of practical ways that you can practice and sort of overcome the fear. And the other thing I think is, and I said this on LinkedIn on the Mom Project post, is that we just got to learn to be unshaken by no. That you might hear no, you might hear, you know, too bad, so sad, try again later. But you just got to say, you know what? No doesn't mean never. No might mean next, or no might mean move on. But I can be okay with that.
That's one of my favorite hashtags attributable to Ashley Hash ever. I'm like, unshaken by no, right? Like the worst thing that will happen is not that you're judged poorly. It's that somebody said no to something that you wanted and that you showed up for, but you showed up, right? You have to be unshaken by that because it's not about necessarily the result, even though that's what we want. It's about asking and advocating. So that is awesome. Niani or Jordan, I don't know if you have anything to add on this sort of like how to go in and strip away the emotional ties and really advocate. But I'm happy to hear from either of you too.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll hand it. I'll get it. So Ashley, I love what you just said. I would just want to, you know, piggyback off of that. That's exactly what I would go in and say. Lead with purpose, right? So when you're leading with purpose, it's like, this is not about me. And so you can think about your parents if you want to help your parents, you know, if you want to help your siblings, if you want to help your children. I think that it's also, when you're talking about your compensation, remember that this is also a package. So if someone is not willing to say, you know, give you a certain amount of money, always have that idea of what would actually, when it comes to your purpose, when it comes to your motherhood, can that be more vacation? Can you have more vacation days so that you can be with your family? You know, and can you work from home? Well, if you're going back to work, can you work from home more often? Are there any other packages that people can consider to add to make something better or better suited for your lifestyle, right? Because we're outside of work, we are human beings. So think about all of this purpose driven rather than just the compensation. And so another thing that I just want to just amplify is what Jordan is doing. I think it's so, so, so important. And I think the investment in yourself and knowing what's out there, knowing that you have I think it's 24, 25 page review from different hiring managers and recruiters and people that have this industry experience, having that type of feedback will give you the confidence. You know, knowing what's out there will give you the confidence because you're aware. You're not coming off of emotions. You're coming off of data. And so if someone is lowballing you, you know exactly what you need to aim for, and you know that you can get better. So you can get a better offer. So I think that investing into something that's going to give you that, you know, I think it's Jordan. Can you remind me how much it costs?
The reports are 195.
Yeah, so 195 can cost you thousands of dollars. Like if you don't invest into that, you can be losing tens of thousands of dollars being unaware of what's on the market. So I definitely think that that's absolutely important, and 100% think that stand by a service like that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Niani. That brings up a good topic, and we've got many. I'm trying to like keep an eye on the chat. I've got my 600 questions here, so I just want to make sure we hit on all the super important stuff. A kind of a two-pronged question here. Total comp, right? So what all makes up compensation, right? It's not just base salary, so let's not get stuck there. And then want to hit on how to negotiate for the non-base salary, non-financial accommodations or evolutions that people might need, specifically as it relates to the working parent segment around flexibility, vacation, you know, parental benefits, whatever those might be, being able to sort of do that. So let's start with total comp. Jordan, I think this would be great to start with you here, given sort of your acuity around 81 cents and sort of how those compensation reports really take into effect. So I'd love if you want to just give a bit of a rundown in terms of how you think about total comp and some things that maybe people generally don't value or discount that could actually be quite valuable.
Yeah, totally. I'm obsessed with total comp. It's like my one thing that I'm always telling people, like, don't just focus on the base salary. Like there's so much more there. So the way I think about it is in terms of 3 different buckets. First, you have your monetary compensation. This is anything that adds more money to your bank account or to your wallet. So base salary is a good example, but also like a signing bonus, or if they, an annual bonus, all of these things help you take home more money at the end of the year. Then the next bucket is you have near monetary. These are things that help you from spending money. So if your company gives free lunch, that's, you know, $8 to $15, depending on where you are and what you eat for lunch, that you don't have to spend that day. Or if they help cover relocation to a new city, then you don't have to pay for that. Or if they have an amazing, you know, healthcare benefits or something, that's less money out of your pocket that you have to pay for healthcare. So those are near monetary. And then the last bucket is non-monetary. And a lot of people discount these because they're like, well, this isn't helping me make more or save more. But at the end of the day, these are the things that make us love our jobs. These are the things that make us excited to work there. These are the things that make us work hard to the point where we get promotions and raises and things like that. And that could be PTO, it could be workplace culture, it could be travel, it could be learning and development, it could be anything that you care about at work that makes you happy to be there, or honestly like unhappy to be there outside of pay. So these are sort of like the 3 big buckets that I think about. Everyone focuses on monetary and everyone focuses on base salary, but signing bonuses are often a place where recruiters can move the most easily, and people ignore those all the time. Annual bonuses, if you're at a place that has flexibility around them, can be amazing because you're saying to the company, only pay me if I do well. If I, you know, bring in more to your bottom line, or if I meet goals, or if I surpass expectations or whatever, then compensate me. And companies love thinking about that. It's like, oh, great, we only pay if you do well for us. Okay, win-win. So those are awesome to think about. Near monetary tend to be a little bit less negotiable, like 401k packages, those tend to be pretty set. Healthcare, those tend to be pretty set. That being said, if you are moving from a job that has better near monetary benefits to one that has worse, sometimes they'll make up for that elsewhere in the offer. So if you're saying, hey, like they used to give me this amazing commuter benefit and a car or something, and you're not going to give me a car, the company might say, okay, well, we'll give you a signing bonus to make up for that. So really important to compare that, especially when you're changing jobs. And then the non-monetary are the things that I think we should all be thinking about the most. Like, what are the things that are going to make you happy at work? And a lot of times it's really easy to negotiate for these because they don't cost anything to the company. It's like, hey, I'd love to talk about how I can be on track to being a manager in 6 months. Or I'd love to think about visiting our international office, or I'd love to take a course around this. Like, these are things that are just going to make you happier at work and better at your job. And so companies are often more amenable to giving these, especially like a lot of times in the new offer, those won't necessarily come up, but especially once you're in a role and you're doing great work, a company wants you to feel happy and wants you to stay. So that's sort of like the overview I'd start with. Hopefully that's helpful.
That was super helpful. Ashley, how do we feel about prepping for a negotiation around, I'm a mom and I need more flexibility. This is really important to me. This is what I need to be a good mom. How do we approach that conversation while also not taking a financial hit? I think is the main asterisk. No motherhood.
Absolutely. I just had a client accept an offer. Literally, that was her scenario. And I, maybe controversial, I don't know, but, I told her to approach it really from not a matter of like, hey, I'm a mom and this is why I need it, but more so from to say, hey, from a work-life balance standpoint, this is why it's important, right? It's really more so to say, I'm a high-impact employee and having additional PTO is important to me. And this is a part of, what I'm presenting as a counter offer. I would say that when you're talking about needing, a flex schedule or PTO or something like that, while it is important, I think, to sort of justify, I think it's also important not to over justify it, right? In a way that maybe paints you in a light that you don't intend to it. I mean, I am a working mom myself. And so, yeah, work-life balance is important to me. But when I'm talking about, total comp, or when I'm talking about my work, I'm really talking about it in the context of, hey, this is a demanding role, or this role carries a lot of responsibility. And with that, with the extra hours or high level of complexity, in order for me to do a great job, I need more time off. Or in order for me to do a great job, I've got to have a flexible work day, to manage all those other facets. And then I'm talking about it, and I think Jordan said this, in their language, right? I'm presenting it in a way that I think any decision maker can be like, oh yeah, I get that. And that's not to say we need to practice sort of dehumanizing or detaching who we are as human beings, because we are humans, we are mothers or parents or caregivers. But I think sometimes I have found clients that maybe focus a little too much on that, and that sort of detracts or derails the conversation a bit, right? Because we're having a business conversation. The other thing I would say is, particularly as we're talking about a total package, our comp, I like how Jordan talked about kind of the adjacent to money, but also kind of non-monetary things, is we really think about presenting them as a total offer, right? Or a total counter, and not sort of onesie-twosie it, like, oh, by the way, I forgot to ask, right? But sort of think about your counter offer as, okay, I'm going to think about the things that matter most to me, right? And that could be space, it could be my flex time or PTO time. And it's really important to me that the company maybe help me prep for and maybe pay for like my PMP certification, right? Or whatever that might look like. And really sort of package that and sort of then put justification around those three things and present that as sort of a total package for then you to be able to have conversation around each item and not sort of piecemeal your total package together.
Super helpful. So, okay. And I realize we're already like 40 minutes in somehow, and I feel like we could talk all day about this topic. So I'm going to get to the meat of this. We serve a lot of moms who are returning to the workforce. So it could be a year out, 5 years out, 15, 20 years out. How do I understand what my market value or market rate is after stepping away for X amount of time? And how do I start to really understand that? Do I go back to what I made when I left the workforce? You know, what is sort of the calculation and how does that work? So Niani, I would love if you want to jump in. I know from a recruiting standpoint, you work with candidates who have potentially stepped out of the paid workforce for a period of time. How do you sort of help those candidates understand what the value is and advocate for that?
Yeah. And so in addition to working with candidates that have been out of the workforce, there have been so many candidates that are pivoting into different industries as well. And so this is where a lot of I would consider a lot of like certifications and a lot of when it comes to transferable skills can come into place. So making sure that you're talking about what the capabilities of what you've done and put that as forth with anything, talking about what you're capable of and talking about what you have done kind of to really invest in yourself in order to kind of meet the demands of what workforce looks like right now. So I would say to make sure that you are kind of in place to get the right or get the best offer to negotiate from. I would definitely say just start investing into courses in those skills that you can put on your resume so that you can bring those up in order to negotiate and share what you are capable of. But I think that that's a good start. And then also knowing what is out there. So continuing to look into data, continuing to understand what people are being paid, and knowing that you have that right, you have the capabilities, you've had this experience, and you have this new training that's going to get you right into speed to go right back into the workforce.
Fantastic. Thanks, Niani. Jordan, anything to add there around kind of market compensation expectations for folks that are re-entering?
I agree with everything Niani said. And I mean, I think one of the biggest concerns I have when I talk to, people who are re-entering the workforce, largely parents, after a time away, is that they'll lowball themselves. Like, I'm very, very concerned about that. I mean, so much has changed and comp changes so quickly. And so I would really be very mindful to spend a lot of time on like the market data side. And in particular, I would also think about how comp structures have just changed. Like, stock and equity in a company was not as nearly as pervasive as it is today, 10, 15 years ago. And so like taking the time to like educate yourself on like new structures, like how retirement benefits shifted, what's sort of the going rate for company retirement match policies, healthcare benefits, things like that. I would, before you like really start looking, I would familiarize myself with that. And then I think the other thing is, because of being worried about lowballing, I would actually recommend considering, if the circumstances allow for it, starting with some contract work first. I think you're going to sell yourself too short on the first one, probably. Like, it makes it so that's not like a terrible commitment. Maybe it's a month of consulting or something that's at a little bit of a lower rate versus like a brand new full-time job where you have to wait like 6, 9, 12 months to change it. So maybe start with some short-term work. That'll also help you, I think, build up your knowledge of what the market rates are, and also just build up your confidence. And then like a nice side effect is you're also building your portfolio, adding to like the certifications and courses and other kind of resume builders, like Niani mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you. Ashley, what happens? You're re-entering the workforce after some time out to care for your family, and you do get a lowball offer. Like, it feels insulting. Like, how would you advise that we sort of counter, and what does that feel like?
Absolutely. So I think we've all hit the market value point home. And so hopefully, if you are watching this, you take that away, is that the first thing to know, when you receive an offer, if you are getting a good offer or a terrible offer, is to always go back to market value, right? And we already talked about tons of resources to help you really just make that determination. Like, this is just unreasonable or not. And so I think that's a great place to start. And then I think the other thing that sometimes people forget that they can use as it relates to presenting a counter offer is using intel that you've gleaned from the interview, right? And what you want to be thinking about are questions that you want to be asking during the interview process that you can then leverage during negotiations are things like, for this role, right? Like, what problems will this person fulfilling this role solve for the company, right? What are the big projects that are coming up? Ultimately, you're using the interview process to really kind of figure out, it's like, okay, where am I going to be able to make a big impact? So once you get that possibly insulting or lowball offer, you kind of go back with your counter and you base that around, well, I've done my research and market value for this salary or for this position is within, this range to that range. I'd like to have a discussion around bringing that offer up to at least market value. And then the second thing is, given what we've discussed in terms of the deliverables, the impact to the business that this position is going to bring, I think this number, right, is a little bit more reasonable for that. What can we do to get there? And again, right, when you're sort of even ending with that question of what can we do to get there, you're now inviting or opening up a conversation around two things that are important to the business, which is one, the impact of the position, and two, market value.
Super helpful. Sorry, my internet connection was going a little wonky, so I took myself off video. Super helpful. Okay, we're gonna dive back into, you've gotten an offer, you're in an interview stage. At what point do you bring up some of these considerations that are important to you in an offer? So let's say it's PTO or flexibility or kind of non-monetary. At what point in the interview process is it most effective to bring that up? Niani, do you want to start with that one?
Yes. So I think that you have to tier the line very carefully when it comes to this. When it comes to compensation, don't bring anything up. I would say don't bring anything up. Well, I would say, what I would say is like, I trust that you guys will give me something that is on market value. I trust that you understand the, what's necessary for this role. That's just what I would say, because people have said that to me, and that's how they got the best offers. So essentially, a lot of the times when recruiters ask about when it comes to compensation, the compensation aspect of it, what is necessary, or what their compensation expectation is, sometimes people don't really know. For example, I got a woman, I ended up offering her 100,000, and she was asking me for 70. And I knew that. So I was kind of like, I'm going to say her thing is 100, but not everybody is like that. Because, not everyone is people first. And that's just the nature of it. So oftentimes, if you don't have all of this information in the first screening calls, just say that you trust that they are going to give you the what's on market value based on what the role is. I think the second thing when it comes to non-compensation, I think that is really important for you to ask hiring managers and recruiters for the sake of your time. Because if something is not going to work with your lifestyle, then I don't think that that's something that you should even attempt to try to go into. Because when it comes to if something doesn't work in the beginning, you can make sure that you filter that out. But if something works and the compensation is something that you need to negotiate, then that's an easier conversation. That's about money. That's something that people can be flexible about. But if they're asking for you to work X amount of hours and in X amount of roles, no matter what you do about compensation, it's just not a good fit. But I would love to hear what Ashley and Jordan has to say about that.
Fantastic. Yeah, Ashley, how early do you start talking about what works for you as a candidate as opposed to trying to nail that, get that offer and seal the deal?
Yeah, I'm exactly where Niani is, which is it's such a fine line. It's always like, gosh, am I talking about marriage on the first date? And I'll go back to a little bit what I mentioned about using the opportunity during an interview to gather intel, right? You can ask questions that sort of allude to things like what's a typical workday look like for the team, right? Do you have, is anyone on the team working remotely or flex schedule right now? Things like that sort of give you an indication of the company's culture or kind of precedents that may have already been set in terms of what the rest of the team is already doing. So those are some ways that you can use questions, which are a very, very powerful tool when it comes to interviewing and even negotiations, to really gather facts without sort of being too forward, right? Imagine you being the interviewer and you talk to a candidate for the first time and they're like, yeah, so do you think it would be a big deal if I, didn't work for 2 hours during the day so I could do e-learning with my kids, right? It may be a little bit early in the conversation to talk about that. It's, again, that premature marriage proposal. But the more that you gather about culture or, again, whatever is important to you, you can then take that back into negotiations and sort of say, hey, during our chat, we talked about, we've already got folks on the team working remotely, and that's something I'd like to explore as an option for me as, that conversation progresses and you're moving towards an offer. But I think for me, when it comes to comp, non-monetary or not, I tend to use more questioning and gathering intel to sort of make a determination of, is this going to be a fit or not?
Yeah, fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Talking about marriage on the first date, it can get a little tricky, right? Jordan, anything to add there around sort of like how early is too early, or any additional thoughts? Or I have many other questions I can jump to.
I agree with everyone else so far. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. And because this is a 101 session, this is a question we get over and over and over again. I do know the answer varies a bit state to state, but how do you recommend candidates address what do you currently make? And there are states where that is illegal, but there are states where it is not illegal and they can ask it. So I would just love to know from the panel, like, how do you not get awkward on that question? And what information do you give so that you can come from an empowered state of what you truly want to get from an offer? Jordan, let's start with you.
I just hate that that's even something. I mean, yeah, Ashley and I think made similar faces to that question. It's just so frustrating. So yeah, it's important to call out that in a number of states, I want to say about 15 so far, it is illegal to ask that question. That being said, that question still gets asked in those states and in other states too. And it's probably not a great look to tell a hiring manager or recruiter that they've done something illegal or broken the law. So like, even if you get asked in a state where they're not supposed to, you can't necessarily call them out. I think there are a couple of options. One is you can say, I'll talk about the one scenario where I do think it can be helpful to share. And that's if you're going from the private sector to the public sector, or you are making a career change and you have the expectation that you are going to be earning less, and that is like okay, and you're willing to do that for the opportunity. In that case, I actually think it can be really helpful to share what you're earning and like anchor yourself higher. That I'd say is probably the only area where I think it's okay. Other than that, I don't think it's helpful or productive, nor should we be held back by what we've been making so far when we have so much research to show that what people make is not equal, nor is it fair. So one answer that I like is, just so I can understand, it sounds like having an understanding of my current pay is helpful for determining what I'll make in this new role. And you just kind of frame it as a question, and you're kind of calling them out and saying, why does that make sense? And why are you asking me that? But you're not saying that super explicitly, you're just kind of asking the question. The other thing you can do is just answer and talk about the expectations instead of what you're making. And you can say something like, my expectation for this role is I'm hoping to make between X and Y, plus, bonus and other benefits and things like that. So that's kind of one way of answering it. And then the other is to try to reframe it as a question and say, I'm still pretty early in the interview process. And so I don't have a super clear understanding of the role yet. That being said, if there's a range that you're looking to hit for this position, that'd be really helpful for me to hear. And so in that example, you're just blatantly not answering their question. But I do think that, where possible, you really want to avoid sharing what you're earning today. And if they keep pushing, one, think that's like a really good indication of what the culture in that organization is going to be like. And as uncomfortable as it may be a sign that it's not a good fit for you. But then second, I would just try to kind of hold out. And maybe when you're prepping for interviews, you can write down like 2, 3, 4 different ways to kind of like punt or defer that question. Getting back to, I think Ashley made the point about scripting things out. I agree that that's super, super helpful, especially for navigating more uncomfortable questions.
Fantastic. Okay, Ashley, current comp question.
Jordan nailed it.
All right.
Nailed it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you. And so I'll ask a bit more of a tactical follow-up there. And I know everyone, my camera is off. I'm sacrificing my camera to make sure the panelists can stay online here through my wonky internet. What about when I'm applying for the job and the comp is required? And it's usually comp expectation and not current comp, because that's a really awkward question. What do I put there to not rule myself out, but also state my worth? Ashley, thoughts on that one?
Sorry, I was like muting myself because stuff's going on in my house. So yeah, that was interesting because I truly hate that, especially on the electronic applications, so where they like basically make you put something in there. And so I think in those instances, it's just a great idea to have a really, again, strong idea of what market value is. If you can put a range, put a range. It is not, I think, again, putting what you consider at least your minimum to be is a good place to start. And just think about, I think the way that question was framed is like, what do I put there so I don't rule myself out? So if you insert your minimum and it's lower than what they want to pay, what truly have you lost, right? If you really think about that, if, you were to get an interview or go through all this big process and they're just like, oh, there's just no way we could even pay you your minimum, you've really not lost anything by entering in a reasonable minimum salary target. So although I do hate that, I think it's also okay to sort of go into an interview situation or opportunity sort of already aligned on like, okay, I'm not going to accept anything less than this.
That's fantastic. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. I think we covered that off. Thank you. That's a very tactical solution to that kind of loaded question on current comp. So Niani, I would love like parting thoughts. Talk to us about secure the bag. What are your what do you want to leave everyone with? Yeah. We'll jump to the next one.
Yes, I think that first thing, one thing that I wanted to say is Ashley, what Jordan Ashley has been saying is amazing. I hope that you guys have been able to catch these gems. I especially liked what Jordan said about how to address the compensation question, about it being, my expectations of this role. Do you have a range? I think it's really, really important to ask the recruiter if you have a range, because the recruiter does have a range. They do, period. Like they know, and that's the reason why they ask you. Their first question is basically essentially to hear what your range is, to see if you're going to move forward. That's the whole point of the recruiter screening. And I think at the end, when it comes to what Ashley said about the total compensation report or total compensation counter offer of, hey, I'd like all of these things, that gives you an opportunity to really negotiate to see if they can take some things down, work with something. And if you gave them that offer and say, I will take this today, if you guys give me these things, that will put something under their butt to really address and say yes. I could say between $5,000 and $10,000. If you say $5,000 and $10,000 above their offer with additional things such as paid time off, that's something that is so small and menial compared to what it costs to recruit. I'm pretty sure that someone would immediately, they would be willing to at least consider it and bring that up to their manager. So just want to leave that as a little thought.
Awesome. Thank you, Niani. We will see you at the summit. We also will share that information. Jordan, parting thoughts on sort of, if you could leave the group with one thing around negotiation and compensation, what would it be?
Yeah. This stuff is so hard. there's a reason why there were 600 questions, and there's a reason why we could easily talk for 4 more hours. Like, this is really, really hard. And I think a lot of times and also we're not taught it, like not in school, nowhere. It's very unnatural, especially if you've been conditioned to feel like you shouldn't ask for things or you should just stay in your lane. So I'll say that it's something I struggle with daily, but it does get easier. Like, if you practice, if you write scripts, if you look for opportunities to negotiate, whether it's in your home life or for something small, it does get easier. And the one thing that really works for me is thinking about the upside. So yes, you're going to have a very uncomfortable 25-minute call with the recruiter, and there's going to be some awkward silences, and you're going to have to go out there and ask for more money. But the upside is amazing. Like, tell me what industry you can work 25 minutes and earn like $10,000. Like, if there is, like, I'm probably in the wrong industry. But yeah, that's what I think about. Like, this is so uncomfortable and we all know it. And you have to do it, because what happens when it goes well, or when it even just goes medium, is so significant and can really be material.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jordan. And Ashley, parting thoughts from the resume career coach, 100K woman extraordinaire. What do we want to leave people with today?
I just want everyone to know that negotiations are an expected part of the interview and hiring process. So this is me wearing my hiring manager hat. It's a conversation we're expecting to have. And when we don't, we're just like, oh, good. I guess I'll be able to tell my boss I saved the company, X amount of dollars on salary because the person didn't negotiate. So maybe I can get a bigger raise. So I just want you to think about that in that context. And the other thing is that, and Jordan and Niani can probably nod their heads in agreement, I don't know that I've ever really seen someone lose an offer by asking, right? It's, again, having that conversation. So if you're afraid of an offer being rescinded because you're asking, don't be, because as a hiring manager, as a recruiter, you're expecting to have the conversation. And you are worth it. That's the other little thing I'm going to say. You're worthy of what you're asking for.
I love that. Okay, I'm back. Can you see my camera now? I didn't want to mess any of that up. That was awesome. You are worth it. I've been reading the chat. We'll share this with the panelists. You guys are going to enjoy it. So many great questions. I know we didn't get to everything. This was meant as an overview and a 101. We will continue on this topic. We know it's super near and dear to everyone's hearts and bank accounts. Your value is an extremely important thing, and getting to that is a really critical skill as we kind of navigate work and life and motherhood. So thank you to our panelists, Niani from Hire Black, Ashley, the 100K resume coach, Jordan from 81 Cents. This was an absolutely incredible session. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to say goodbye now. I'll end the Zoom call. I will abruptly drop everyone. But thank you guys so much. And we will follow up with all of the attendees. We had over 2,500 people join us. So even though it just looked like the 4 of us rapping about negotiation and compensation, this is hugely valuable to a really incredible community. So thank you all very much, and look forward to working with you in the future. Bye, guys.